Do you live in a Georgia county that doesn't have at least one pediatric doctor? You just might, according to this new Atlanta News First investigation. This is Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. I'm Sierra Cummings, and I'm joined by Andy Parati. How you doing, Andy?
Good. How are you?
This is one of those stories that I really enjoyed watching because I learned something from you, as I often do, but it's a topic that I hadn't thought of much recently. So why'd you want to do something on local pediatricians?
So last year I did a lot of reporting on vaccines and misinformation involving vaccines. And I ended up speaking to a lot of pediatricians involving that story, those series of stories. And one of them mentioned to me saying, hey, do you know that dozens of counties in Georgia does not have one pediatrician? So I reached out to the organization where a lot of these pediatricians are a part of. And I said, hey, do you know of someone that has a hard time or maybe travels far to find a pediatrician? And we ended up telling this story.
There's a church right down here we're going to pass.
Markeisha Hawkins takes us on a drive she knows like the back of her hand,
I know everybody over here.
pointing out every church, farm, and home along the way.
It's going to be on your right-hand side.
A 30-minute route out of town she's taken hundreds of times to care for her children. Her sons, Ethan and Logan, were both born prematurely. Her firstborn weighed just 2 pounds.
It was scary because I got this preemie. And for one, it's not the regular preemie. They're called micro preemie because anything can go wrong at any moment with those kids.
Logan spent weeks in the hospital and suffered serious lung complications. Markeisha knew she needed a pediatrician to care for them long term. They live in Sparta, Georgia, about 2 hours south of Atlanta. When you were searching, when you typed in pediatrician Sparta, Georgia, what came up?
Nothing.
Not
No.
one pediatrician.
No.
Markeisha's county, Hancock, is one of 63 in Georgia without a single licensed practicing pediatrician. That's nearly 40% of the state's 159 counties.
Hello. How are we?
Dr. Christy Mountain Bonner is the Hawkins family pediatrician who practices in neighboring Washington County. She's the only pediatrician in private practice there, caring for about 4,000 children.
We'll be.
Some families drive nearly an hour to see her.
It scares me because in those other counties, I know there are premature births and premature babies that are needing the care. And sometimes I find in rural communities, there are issues with transportation. There are issues with finances to fund transportation.
A study published by the American Academy of Pediatrics in December reveals a compounding problem. More hospitals are dropping pediatric services altogether, disproportionately affecting rural areas. Dr. Kenneth Michelson authored the study.
What we found was that hospitals have become less capable at taking care of kids over time. More than half of rural units actually closed over a 15-year period, which is just amazing and huge.
And in your opinion, what's the impact on children's health in those communities?
First is that if you're in a community, most likely pediatric hospital care is getting farther away from you. So if your child is really sick and needs to be hospitalized, you are likely to need to travel farther for that. I think the second clear impact is that it makes the overall system more brittle.
I'm listening to your heart. General practitioners, they're okay for general things. But if you have kids, you want somebody who can see about a kid.
Right.
They're different. Their bodies are different.
If you retire today and no one replaced you, what would be the impact to this community?
I think it would be great in terms of, because I think you would have a situation where patients are scrambling to find someone to see their child quickly. And I think the scramble would be too large for the other practice to take on.
No pediatricians, no doctor, no urgent care.
After a long road to recovery, Markeisha's sons are now healthy and thriving, and she credits their pediatrician who was there every step of the way. If you didn't have Dr. Mountain, where do you think your kids would be as far as...
I cannot imagine without Dr. Mountain.
Lungs sound clear.
Don't even make me think about it. I can't.
Andy, some people might have heard or watched that story and thought, well, this doesn't affect me, so I don't have to worry about it. I've been there before when I don't see an immediate effect. But, in this story, you do a good job at highlighting the shortage creates an overall issue for the broader system.
Yeah, it really impacts the entire system. If you don't have pediatricians in the area where you live, that simply means that you have to drive much farther. And let's face it, not a lot of people have the time, the money, the resources to maybe travel all the way to Atlanta if they need a pediatric specialist. So it really impacts the entire system. There are some solutions. Some of those solutions involve telehealth. I was speaking to the expert in Chicago who produced that study that's mentioned in the piece, and he says, it's not just your typical telehealth where maybe me and you would set up an appointment with a doctor. This would be sort of during just emergency sort of situations and also just normal expert consultations. So let's say there's an emergency situation and you need a pediatric surgeon to weigh in on whether a child needs to be transported to a hospital. You get that pediatrician, that surgeon on telehealth through that video conferencing, and they can see up close what the issue is, not just reading a chart. They might be able to say, yes, get that child to, an ER immediately, or send them up to Atlanta. And then there's also, how do you get more pediatricians into the system to help with all those counties that do not have one pediatrician? And right now, the state does offer some tuition reimbursement options up to $150,000 in tuition reimbursement. Of course, you have to work in some of those underserved areas for a number of years before you get that reimbursement. But those are just at least two options. I know the Atlanta Children's Hospital, they've also got some things in the works. They actually reached out to me after this original story aired, saying we want to talk about what we're doing and what we're doing to collaborate with other, organizations like some medical schools. So there's some things in the works. This is a well-known issue in the medical community. Me, maybe finding out about it for the first time, but the medical community has seen this as an issue for a number of years.
And those are some top-down solutions. But in the meantime, families like this one, they either have to continue to drive really far or go to that general practitioner, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing to just go to a local general doctor.
Right. I mean, if you need a child to see a doctor, certainly go to a general practitioner. Now, one of the things that I found interesting about this story is I kept asking experts, hey, what's the health outcomes if your child only goes to a general practitioner, a family doctor, not a pediatrician? Is there a difference in health outcomes? Are there children that are, that never see a pediatrician that maybe have more complications or things that that come up that maybe a general practitioner wouldn't catch? And I really don't know whether that data exists. I reached out to a number of organizations and experts, so I don't know if those studies have been done. I think the thing that kept coming back to me, though, was that, well, we don't know that answer. Going to a pediatrician, though, it's like that they have a specific specialty. They're going to be, taking a little bit more time. They're going to identify things maybe just a little quicker than maybe a general practitioner that only sees, maybe adults.
Great perspective. Thanks so much, Andy, for this story. Thank you for tuning in to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. For more on the story, go to atlantanewsfirst.com and click on the A&F Investigates tab. You can listen to more award-winning investigations wherever you get your podcast by searching Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First. And tune in Sundays for an hour-long episode of Uncovered, where we highlight some of our biggest investigations that impact our communities.